don't know if Trump, I could probably say this for a fact. Trump probably doesn't have the majority of his wealth in Bitcoin. RFK does, right? So I'm very curious to hear what he has to say, and potentially, I'll change my
Much more to come today at the Bitcoin conference here in Nashville, Tennessee. Howard Lutnick, CEO at Cantor Fitzgerald, Ro Khanna, Democratic representative from the state of California, and of course, Donald J. Trump, former president of the United States, potentially future president of the United States. We'll be back after this break with another packed panel. Triple, even quadruple maxi in terms of investing. His plea for the U.S. government to buy Bitcoin, him laying out his bear, base, and bull case for the Bitcoin price. Bear case, $3 million a coin, base case, $13 million a coin, and bull case, $49 million a coin. Of course, the price right now hovering around $67,000. That would be quite a move. Reaction.
Bitcoin, I'd want to get everyone hyped, and it just seems, that every conference continues to get more and more bullish. And I gotta say that $49 million prediction. Personally, I love what Saylor's done for the movement. that is very, very, very bullish.
Well,
very
he's
optimistic.
talking about something that is just starting to happen, which is that corporations are putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Frank, obviously you're reporting on the industry for Bitcoin Magazine. Can you talk about this movement that Saylor has led and the momentum that might back up the idea of a $49 million Bitcoin?
Yeah, I was actually at his Bitcoin for Corporations event. I think it was about 2 or 3 months ago out in Las Vegas. And the tone was very different compared to years past in terms of the way businesses are thinking about Bitcoin. One, not only putting it on their balance sheet, but also accepting it as a form of payment. So yeah, I think the team at Lightspark was a big speaker there, which is a team that's implementing Lightning, helping businesses accept more Bitcoin as payment, especially for international business. I think this is really important. But I think people are looking at Bitcoin as less of a taboo, like just purely risk-on asset, and thinking about allocating anywhere from maybe 1 to 5% of their treasury to Bitcoin just no longer seems like a totally crazy or wild thing to do as a company.
David, of course, you're in Washington. Is Michael speaking to this audience? Obviously, his plea for the U.S. government to buy Bitcoin. What do you make of his price predictions?
Well, I think it's important to remember that there are a ton of asset classes out there that have a monetary premium. You know, you could look at things like art. You could even look at things like real estate. You could look at things like public equities, right? There's, when you buy a public equity, you're sort of buying a sort of stake in the future cash flow of the business, but there's a monetary premium on that. And so I think that when you realize that Bitcoin is probably the only asset that should have that like monetary premium, you can sort of start to see why a really bullish price prediction is not so crazy. Now, I saw on Twitter like a good comment, which was, I would have asked Michael, what's the price of a loaf of bread or a gallon of gas in a $49 million per Bitcoin world? But I mean, there's a lot of value globally, and a lot of things have a monetary premium that shouldn't. So,
well, Saylor talked a lot about the weaknesses of other asset classes. We see him.
A forma que você vai utilizar para rodar os robôs de Instagram. Bora para outra tela.
That is absurd.
O programa que a gente escolheu para utilizar é o ManyChat. Por quê? O ManyChat é a plataforma oficial do Meta, autorizada, autenticada, validada, permitida pelo Meta para rodar essas automações, junto com o Instagram, com o Facebook e tudo mais. Então, saiba que você está mexendo com a plataforma.
They'll just leave the properties empty just to maintain their purchasing power, just to keep their wealth. Now that you have something like Bitcoin, where you can memorize a 12-word seed phrase and you could store theoretically millions, trillions, billions of dollars in your mind, that's an absolute game changer. By the way, I definitely don't recommend doing that. You should definitely write down your seed phrase properly.
Well, of course, Saylor inspiring a movement of his own. We heard on Thursday from Semler Scientific, MetaPlanet, of course, other companies putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet, Reddit, Bitcoin Depot, DeFi Technologies. David, your thoughts on just this idea, should corporations buy Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I think they almost have a fiduciary duty to have some Bitcoin. I mean, I think at this point it is very obvious you have an obligation to have some percentage of your corporation's treasury in Bitcoin.
Well, let's go back to the numbers, though. The $49 million Bitcoin, right? I think at some level this seems unimaginable to people, right? How would you, if the people at home were hearing 49
million. You want to have a good idea of what's going to happen in the future, it's probably a good idea to study the past, right? Now, does that mean that the same thing's going to happen? No, but I do believe that Bitcoin is a superior asset, and I do agree with David. I think people are going to sell inferior assets to the superior asset, and the superior asset is Bitcoin. And by the way, I got to say, the crowd is getting rowdy because the Orange Man is coming to the Orange Conference, and Orange Coin, good.
Yeah, just narrating it for the people at home. There's a stacked line around the venue now. People are throwing orange hats, so we'll try to get a look at what they say. Really, the atmosphere here is electric already. Let's just talk about Bitcoin conferences. What does it mean to have Donald Trump here? Is this good for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, because as Bitcoin grows in price, it grows in political and geopolitical relevance. I mean, the sort of issues that matter with a sort of non-state money when it's a $1 billion market cap are very different than the issues that matter for a non-state money with a $1 trillion market cap. And so, look, I expect next year we're going to have somebody discussing Bitcoin, because if they're not, they're going to get blindsided.
Yeah, I think it's important to have the recognition. And with that said, I don't think we should be pandering to politicians. I don't think that's necessarily should be the strategy, but to be recognized by the powers that be, to recognize that this is something they're recognizing, that this is something they can no longer ignore, that they have to be here to address 20,000 people here. I think it is important. We live in a civil society. We live in a democratic society where we vote for our leaders. I'm glad to see that they're concerned with something like Bitcoin now and that they're paying attention.
Quickly.
Yeah, so I gotta say is, I think that it's not that Bitcoin needs these politicians. It's that these politicians need Bitcoin in order to get elected. And I think it's a testament to the power of our movement.
Well said, and of course, a $49 million Bitcoin, maybe not so crazy when you have the likes of Larry Fink calling it a flight to quality. Of course, we'll be right back after this break with a more all-star analysis of what we'll see today at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville. Stay with us.
Why?
What's the second best? There is no second best.
We will ensure that the future of crypto and the future of Bitcoin will be made in America.
So yeah, today we're going to be talking about runes.
We're talking about runes.
But first,
At Bitcoin 2024, powered by Bitcoin Magazine. Once again, I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, editor of Bitcoin Magazine. We've got an all-star panel here talking about reactions from yesterday. Excitement for today, of course. David Zell to my left, founder of Bitcoin Policy Institute. Frank Corva, lead business reporter at Bitcoin Magazine, joined now by Femi Lunge, Human Rights Foundation's global Bitcoin lead. Femi, would like to bring you into this conversation. We've been talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s speech yesterday, coming out saying that America should buy Bitcoin. There's anticipation for Donald J. Trump. Speech today, how is the world looking at what's going on here at Bitcoin 2024?
I think, particularly from the Global South where I'm from, unfortunately or fortunately, policymakers typically look at the US and in many ways copy what's coming out of the US. So I think it's a good signal. For lots of them, I think there is lots of opportunity for countries in the Global South to actually custody a lot of their foreign reserves. Policy, I think, is a good signal. That said, I heard RFK say the US is going to buy 550 Bitcoin a day to 4 million Bitcoin, so they have equal proportion to their current size of GDP. But I'm not sure the rest of the world really wants that, because we don't want to still have the US as dominating the rest of us.
Right. Well, let's talk about that. Obviously, you spoke about the global has entered the conversation in those regions?
So, I mean, very good question. I'm from Nigeria. We've seen hyperinflation in the last 1 year in Nigeria. A year and a half ago, a US dollars was worth about 700 naira. Today it's worth 1,005. So people have lost a lot of their purchasing power. In the middle of that, I mean, in Africa we have 46 currencies. We want to trade amongst each other. A few years ago, the government in Africa signed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, one of which is not neutral currency. So I see Bitcoin playing a role of an independent arbitral currency. In Nigeria right now, we suffer from foreign currency shortages. We're seeing lots of retailers or importers who are paying suppliers in the West using Bitcoin and USDT. Of course, I think we also see, and I work with the Human Rights Foundation. One of the things we work with democracies are repressed countries across the world. Unfortunately, in those countries, when the government see you as an opponent, the first means through which they get at you is your money. And so part of what we're doing is training human rights activists, training non-profit organizations, training young people, protesters, to be able to move as much of their wealth into Bitcoin, their assets intact. We're also at the moment tracking central bank digital currencies,
right,
which are a big thing. Again, I'm from Nigeria, and Nigerian government possible for, but we know that in that kind of system where we have governments that are not necessarily always acting in favor of the people, there are many nasty things that they could actually do with that.
Well, of course, Frank, you've been writing about this as well. I want to go to your recent reporting. You just did a feature profile on Maya Parpo. She's running for president of Suriname on a Bitcoin platform. Why is she doing this, and what is her story?
There's a ton of corruption. They're experiencing about 60% inflation per year in Suriname, and part of this is a result of corruption within the country. Also, it's a pretty wild story. If you can, go check out my piece in Bitcoin Magazine on this. For her, because of corruption, something that was happening, both sort of an alliance between politicians and bankers, her father was murdered when she was 13 years old. And I think a lot of what she's doing now, she's trying to say, like, look, I've been personally affected by this corruption. I want to do something about it for my country. What's wild about her and what's different about her and Bukele is that she's the first president in the world that's actually running on putting her country on a Bitcoin standard, talking about using it as a medium of exchange. Yeah, what she's doing, I think it's unprecedented, and the eyes of the world should be on her.
Take a quick break now. Going to our roving reporter, we're going to bring you not only great analysis today, but looks at what's happening around the venue. Of course, thousands of people streaming in. We've got Q Gahimi, our roving reporter, with a special update from the ground floor.
Right now, and as you can see over here to my right, the line has already started to form to get in, to just see the opening remarks. All the way down in the back, you can see where the line is leading to. Now look, that line is twisting round and round over there. Yesterday, leading up to RFK's speech, we saw the line go all the way around the expo hall to the other side. Things are abuzz. We are still so early. We haven't even had the first talks yet, and people are lining up, getting excited. I see people in line with books, getting ready to park their butts there for the day to make sure they have the best seat in the house to watch Donald Trump's talk. We're all getting really excited to hear what he has to say. Rizzo, back to you guys at the desk.
About what you do at HRF and the challenges you're overcoming. Is that good?
And we're back here at the Mara News Desk, of course, engaged in conversation about the hot issues of today. One that we just discussed, adoption. So obviously a big challenge here, or not a challenge here in Nashville, Tennessee, where we have lots of Bitcoin users. But talking about the Global South, Femi, your view on just the challenges of adoption on the ground that you've seen?
I think before I talk about challenges, I think it's probably important to clarify what adoption means. I think, and my theory is that we have the problems of moving value that Bitcoin addresses, and we here being people in the Global South. Yes, we have challenges around storing our value, but I think a lot of the bigger problems we have is how do we plug into the global monetary system? How do we plug into global trade without going through intermediaries that fleece us all through the process? And I think Bitcoin helps us do that very well. Because it's permissionless. Part of the challenges I find with adoption, though, is a lot of the stories of what you can do with Bitcoin that's coming to people in Africa and developing world is not necessarily coming from our worldview. It's coming from the Western, the American worldview. And so for a lot of the people, it's not landing properly because it's not speaking to what's important to them. So what we try to do is actually start from the other way around. Understand the people, understand their needs, understand the challenges they have, and then find a way that they can see how Bitcoin solves a very important role in helping them solve their problems. Yeah.
Well, of course, the bigger vision here is not just freedom of speech, freedom of transaction, right. More freedom for the world. David, would love to get your take of you're interacting with policymakers and talking to people. How do you interject freedom into the conversation?
I think by reminding people of the financial privilege they enjoy by being a holder of one of the 5 largest currencies. I mean, if you are born today randomly, you have a greater than coin flip odds of living in an authoritarian regime where you have no property rights, you have no civil liberties, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of commerce. If you are born today randomly, you've got like a 2 in 7 chance of living in a country with double or triple digit inflation where you can work your entire life and not make a dollar. Love is how blessed and fortunate we are to be dollar holders, and remind people that if you're living in most parts of the world, you don't enjoy the same freedoms by the government that we do. And so what Bitcoin does is take those freedoms, those civil liberties, freedom of speech, association.
Actually, one of Femi's colleagues at HRL.
Olá, pessoal. Tudo bom? Bem-vindos ao canal. Hoje, vamos dar uma olhada no mercado de criptomoedas, que vem passando por uma fase de retração. O valor total de mercado caiu para o 2,42 trilhões, refletindo um clima de cautela, bem parecido com o que vemos no mercado de ações. Começando pelo Bitcoin, o preço caiu para cerca de 66,4 mil. Essa queda é significativa.
The donors could not use the traditional financial rails because those Russian donors would have been persecuted by Putin as well. So even our ability in the United States to donate to a politician without having any sort of repercussions, this is something that we take for granted here.
Femi, we'd love to get your talks. Obviously, when people hear that the Human Rights Foundation is at a Bitcoin conference, how do you answer that question?
Like I said, so if you are a human rights activist, one of your biggest points of vulnerability is your money. Like Frank mentioned, not just to you and your accounts, but even the people that want to give to your cause. But that's even at a national level. If you go down to the individual level and individual liberties, there are parts of the world where just be a woman counts against you, or be from a certain sect or a certain race counts against you, and it limits the kind of things that you can do. They say money makes the world run, and so your financial freedom, your ability to earn value, be sure that you can retain that value and share that value with whoever you want without fear that it causes any repercussion, for us is a big thing. And so at the Human Rights Foundation, we have a very strong focus and a strong team that's looking at financial freedom. People don't typically think about money when they think about human rights, but we've seen the examples like you gave. One of the things that Anna said occurred when Putin was going to go after them was they woke up one day and she opened the bank account, the banking app for the foundation, and they were negative. We don't think that's right. We don't think it's right that governments are working on central bank digital currencies that potentially can make them create money that can expire, that can give them the opportunity to track you, everything you do, everything you spend on, without going through the legal means. So it's something that's in the blind spot. It's in the blind spot of donors who are giving funds, supporting people who are thinking about human rights from the traditional right to vote, right to association, right to free speech, but which we think is very important.
Of course, running down on time here before we go back to the main stage here at Bitcoin 2024. David, I want to go back to you just for a topic that Femi brought up, central bank digital currencies. Is this a real threat in the United States? Do you want to see...
Recognize that we can't legislate all of our problems away.
David, thanks for your thoughts. Obviously, it's heating up here. We'll be bringing you all the news, insight, and analysis as it happens here at the Mara News Desk. The lines are wild. The vibes are wild. Bitcoin 2024 is underway, and it's the final day. We're throwing it back to a special sponsor advertisement message before we go to the main stage as day 2 begins here in Nashville, Tennessee. Stay with us.
Absolutely. To open us up, we have an incredible session with three amazing candidates who are running for Senate. We have John Deaton, Bernie Moreno, and Sam Brown. They will be moderated by David McIntosh. Please give them a wonderful applause, and let's get this show on the road.
Good morning, Bitcoiners. It's a great day today, huh? Yes. I'm plugging for Bitcoin to go over 70 and even higher when the president speaks. But today, this morning, we're going to have a panel of three gentlemen who are competing to join the United States Senate, change the majority so that they will be pro-Bitcoin in their outlook and pro-economic growth for the country. With me today, these three gentlemen are in some of the most competitive Senate races around the country. Bernie Moreno, in the middle, is running in Ohio against Sherrod Brown, one of the worst senators when it comes to Bitcoin and digital assets. Next to me is John Deaton, who is taking on Elizabeth Warren.
I got some fans over there. Wow. Fan club.
And at the far end of the panel is Sam Brown, who's taking on Senate banking regulations, one thing after another. Well, the way we resolve these issues in America is through an election. And each of these men is standing for election in order to make those changes. So I want to quickly get to them. I've introduced who they are, but I want each of them to tell you a little bit about themselves, their background, and their view on Bitcoin. Bernie, why don't we start with you in Ohio?
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for caring so much about your industry. I'm Bernie Moreno. I'm the Republican nominee in Ohio. Born in South America, was in the retail automotive business, bought my first dealership when I was in my 30s. Built a group of 15 dealerships that represented 30 brands, sold that, started a technology company that allowed car titles to be digital using blockchain. We had to pass a law to allow that to happen because the federal government insisted that one piece of duplicate with wet ink, which was insane. We got that done. It opened my eyes to public policy. I never thought I would run for office. The guy I'm running against is Sherrod Brown. He went to Yale University, majored in Russian studies, went into elected office when Richard Nixon was in the White House. And the next time you're at a big sporting event, throw a ball out into the stadium. Whoever catches that ball is more qualified to regulate cryptocurrency than Sherrod Brown. He's Elizabeth Warren's youthful idiot. Has no interest in understanding what Bitcoin is. Because at the end of the day, what these guys care about is centralized control. They don't want to have decentralized control. They want to have all the power to themselves. We got to get rid of these people that want to die in office. That's why I'm running.
Sam, tell us a little bit about Nevada and your race there.
11, I went to the United States Military Academy at West Point and ultimately, as I got my MBA, started a business in pharmaceutical services, but a couple of years ago, our country has taken a radical turn to the left. And I'm just curious, how many folks out here have been politically engaged before? I'm talking about voters. How many of you vote? All right?
Good.
All right. How many of you have volunteered or contributed to a campaign? Okay.
Nice.
Handful. All right. What is required of us at this time is to take the next step. If you've never voted before, the issues you care about are on the line. If you've never volunteered on a campaign before, you've got to get involved. If you've never contributed to a campaign before, you've got to get involved. How many of you want to see the left attack Bitcoin, attack our energy industry in a way that hurts us? Do we have any single issue voters out here on Bitcoin? Anybody? All right. It's time to get involved. And my next step in service to country was running for United States Senate. And I'm taking on Jackie Rosen, who, if you're familiar with Harry Reid, she came in with his machine, and it's time to retire her and get some new leadership in office.
Thank you, Sam. And our next speaker, I first noticed him when he took on Gary Gensler in a lawsuit against the SEC and won. And now John's taking on Elizabeth, and he's going to win. John, tell us about your race and what's going on.
Thank you, and it's great to be here. Listen, I'm from Detroit, Michigan. That's where I was born. Single mother on welfare and food stamps in one of the worst neighborhoods in America in the last 40 years, called Highland Park, Detroit. And listen, when I read the Bitcoin white paper in December of 2016, I thought of my mother. Because I remember standing in line, watching her debase herself because she couldn't keep a minimum bank deposit. So she had to go to those check cashing stores that you see in the hood. And I saw her beg them, can you please take not 20% or 15%? We need that money for food. So when I read the Bitcoin white paper, I thought of her, and I thought of how we can eliminate the predatory fees of the banks and the middleman. When I was in college, I would send my mother money to help with my younger two siblings. I'd send her $100. It would go through Western Union. They would take $12 or $15. And so, listen, when they're not looking, that's where you pay attention. I just disclosed to the Federal Election Commission that my net worth 82% in Bitcoin, baby. And I'm going against Elizabeth Warren, who wants to ban the self-custody of Bitcoin in the United States. She went on Meet the Press, and she told Chuck Todd that America is ready for a Federal Reserve-issued CBDC. George Orwell is rolling over in his grave, and I'm looking you in the face and telling you, I'm going to beat Elizabeth Warren.
Woo! Thank you, John. I run Club for Growth. We have a bipartisan pro-Bitcoin group called BIP that fights on these policy issues up on the Hill. We've also got a Bitcoin Freedom Pact to help them all these gentlemen all get elected. But I want to ask each of you, what do you think the most important issue is that we need to take the left on, take Elizabeth Warren, take Sherrod Brown, Rosen? What do you think are the most important issues in this area that you guys are going to be facing? Bernie.
You know, fundamentally, what I've seen in this country here from South America is that our Declaration of Independence was very clear. We have certain inalienable rights. And everybody reads that section, except for Joe Biden, he forgot it. But at the end of that sentence, it's really important. It says, in order to secure these rights, governments are constituted among men deriving their powers from the people. We are the ones that are in charge of this country. These politicians have got it backwards. They think they're in charge. They think they get to tell us what kind of car to drive, what kind of stove to own, whether we can own Bitcoin or not. That's what's on the ballot this year. We're going to take this country back. We're in charge, not these politicians.
Sam. Yeah, I'll just jump off from there and say that one of the things that we've seen is an abuse of the executive branch that creates, all sorts of bureaucratic roles and Congress. Broad industries as energy and specifically targeting folks like Bitcoin miners. So that's one of the things that I'm excited, not just within this particular industry, but broadly speaking, to be a part of a Senate majority come November that is actively going to work on behalf of the people. As Bernie said, we need to represent the people to create rules that impact so many of us.
Thank you, Sam. John, what do you see as some of the most important issues facing us?
Well, it comes down to self-determination. When you look at me, you're looking at the living embodiment of the American dream and everything that's possible in a great free country. And so Elizabeth Warren, if she actually were for poor people and extermination, and I look at Bitcoin, I look at economic freedom. And so I think that economic freedom, Massachusetts just became the single most expensive state to live in the country. So I think that this message is going to be a good one.
Terrific. Thank you. Now let's move from Washington back to the campaign trail, because you all have to win your races in order to go and change that city, which won't be easy. But you'll get a mandate from the voters in your state for the things that you want to do. How are you coming up against your opponent and on these issues, on the questions of pain? What's the dynamic there, Bernie, on when it comes to on the ground winning the race?
Yeah, so my opponent, again, as I mentioned, 50 years in elected office, never had a job other than being an elected official. Again, one of these guys wants to die in office, which is insane to me. His attack ad against me is, I'm a car dealer. Not a good car dealer, not a bad car dealer, just a car dealer. It's not enough of a pejorative for him to say I was a car dealer, though. He calls me a used car salesman, which I fully embrace, by the way, fully embrace. Because the reality is, somebody who sells used cars wakes up every single day, has to go to work, has to get to a result in order to provide for their family. These career politicians do nothing, do terrible things, wreak havoc, get us $35 trillion in debt, and guess what? Somehow that guy's a millionaire. Explain that one to me. So from my perspective, what he thinks is honorable, which is to collect a government paycheck your whole life and not have to be accountable, shows who he's really all about. So this is about, again, the people standing up and making it clear that the politicians work for us. They're not supposed to be there forever, and we need people who've at least had some sense of reality in their lives that isn't Washington, D.C.
Sam, what's it like there in Nevada?
Right now it's a lot hotter than it is here, but as we get into the next 100 days, the campaign's going to really heat up even more. Look, I mentioned earlier, Jackie Rosen was the protege of Harry Reid. And, for those who remember how much he ruled the Senate with an iron fist when he was a leader there for the Democrat Party, know that they built a machine to get people elected in Nevada. But we're breaking that apart. And one of the scary things about Jackie Rosen is she goes wherever the wind blows. Wherever the political winds blow, she will be. And so the warning to all of us is, especially at a time in an election like this, where there is so much at stake. So much at stake in the presidential election, so much at stake in our Senate elections and the House elections. There's no margin for error. And if we sit back and we allow folks like Jackie Rosen, who, by the way, David, is now taking very conservative policy positions that I have been talking about for the last 2 years and repeating them as if they are her own. We have got to be wary of someone like that. She is, in fact, voted 99% of the time with Joe Biden's policies. Now, she might come out, especially because here I am at the Bitcoin conference, and I have been very supportive of our efforts, of the industry at large, and she's probably going to say, hey.
Welcome back to the Mara News Desk, powered by Bitcoin Magazine. I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, editor at Bitcoin Magazine. The grand finale of Bitcoin 2024 today. We've got a bunch of great speakers ahead. Marsha Blackburn, Vivek Ramaswamy, Ro Khanna, Howard Lutnick, Donald Che, Trump, of course, last but not least. John Deaton, you just heard, taking aim at Elizabeth Warren and her anti-crypto army in the U.S. But, of course, Bitcoin, a global movement. So we're going to transition to that subject with our panel. Carlos Torriello, to my left. To his left, Rafa Cordon, both of the immutable proof of storage blockchain network Simple Proof, and last but not least, Craig Corva, lead business reporter at Bitcoin Magazine. So the topic right now is how the Bitcoin being a little bit more accurate with the help of Bitcoin. Carlos, why don't you take us in?
Thanks. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Guatemala, for those that don't know, is right after Mexico. So it's just the next cul-de-sac over. And we have those gather, they vote, their totals get tallied into a document, and it's all paper-based. That's fantastic. But then these paper documents get scanned and published onto the internet, and that's when things can get a little weird sometimes. And so what we proposed is to, at that moment when the paper meets the internet, we introduce a filter called Bitcoin. And so these documents, as soon as they are digitized, are time-stamped to Bitcoin, so that when the media goes to the internet to verify the results for themselves, they can trust, not because of what Simple Proof did in our databases, but rather what mathematics and cryptography allows in open source code to just verify the integrity of the information produced on election night.
Rafa, I want to go to you. Obviously, people coming from the stream familiar with Bitcoin as money. Bitcoin's $69,000 right now.
made a mistake and the timestamps on the files in the metadata produced by the hardware were wrong, basically because of misconfiguration of the hardware. Had they not used Bitcoin, like Rafa said, as an independent time chain, like the final arbiter of what time is real, they would not have had a second source, an immutable source, a trustless source to compare that time, and then potentially our democracy could have failed and we could have gone to civil war.
Rafa, I imagine these conversations were difficult, right? They're talking about this problem of election verification. You say Bitcoin.
I think when you talk with public officials, we need to sort of change the language a bit. And so we talk about blockchain, we talk about not being able to alter documents. We don't say hash, we say the digital fingerprint. And so we modify the language to something that sort of is in the realm of their world. For example, legal speak. Well, we talk about notaries, so we make make examples of how this compares to a notary, like a digital witness, things like that.
Of course, winding down here before we send it to Q, our roving reporter around the venue. I want to talk about how successful this most recent election was before we continue. So we talked about the problems in the past. What were you able to achieve in this most recent election, 2023?
So the main success is that with these election fraud accusation arguments, now everyone who believes in mathematics can prove for themselves. They don't need to trust us. They can just download the data and see for themselves that no, actually every data that we have on the election can be traced
all started in 2019 in the heart of San Francisco, the first major Bitcoin conference in years that kicks, and then Miami, a place where enthusiasts, developers, dreamers, and innovators can come Bitcoin better. It has been an amazing 5 years and 8 conferences, thanks to all of you. Bitcoin Conference has become the largest premier global Bitcoin gathering in the world, leading hyper-Bitcoinization. While Miami was incredible, it was time to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. So we took the conference on the road. Nashville, Tennessee was the obvious choice, a city known for music and freedom. Next year, the conference is hitting the road again in search of the next global stage. We are headed to a new city next year. With hyper-Bitcoinization right around the corner, we have no plans to take the foot off the gas. Find out where we are headed next. Scan the QR code and be at the main stage for the big announcement.
Well underway here at Music City Center in Nashville. Turning it more to a somber, reflective note, we have a new guest here, Chris Yonda, Bitcoiner and American, who was at the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, where former President Donald J. Trump was involved in an assassination attempt, or almost assassinated. Chris, your story.
Yeah, so at the rally, just went with my family, my wife, my sister, my brother-in-law, my dad. Just went to go have a good time, and we were promoting Bitcoin there. My wife and I were wearing our Bitcoin bright orange shirts, trying to just spur more adoption, see if people would ask us questions about it, because it was a few days before the rally where the conference announced that Donald Trump was going to be the keynote speaker. So this is like the perfect culmination of Bitcoin and politics just about to happen, and people should know what's going on, what's important, the policy. And so we just wore our shirts just to see if somebody would talk to us. There were, 60,000, 40,000, I don't know the number, but maybe 3 people, 2 or 3 people, even said, what the heck are you wearing? Why are you wearing bright orange shirts to a Trump rally? What's that be? We're just so Bitcoin itself.
Well, why don't you take us into the moment? Obviously, many Americans, saw this at home, saw this on the news. What was it like being there? Did you understand what was happening in real time?
Yeah, so in real time, you're watching everything